Age of Empires 4 has just come out, and with it we get 8 full featured factions to dive in on, each one with their own unique mechanics, soundtrack, aesthetics, and even the English getting a passive bonus to terrible cuisine. In this video today, we'll be covering the 6th in our series by talking about the Delhi Sultanate, a faction that is not quite straightforward, but once you wrap your head around how their research system works and get their big bad elephant Dumbos online, you're ready for some true ground pounding. I've covered this in my ranking guide to help give you an overview of each faction, which you can find linked in the upper right corner. The way this video is structured, we'll be going over a general overview of the faction, discuss the unique units, go into the technology specific to this civilization, talk about each landmark through the ages, quickly go over the Navy, and close the video out talking about army compositions, build orders, and what have you. You can quickly navigate to each topic mentioned by using the chapters linked in both the timeline and description if you so wish. And if you'd like to see the other guides, they'll be linked at the end of this video to my playlist that will have each guide as I create it. You can also find that in the pinned comment below. If this is your first time on my channel, the way I like to do things is upfront the information within so you can decide to stick around to hear me out on what my explanations are and what have you. So, with that being said, the Delhi Sultanate is all about research. It is the name of the game for them. All their research is free, but it just takes a long time to complete. This is sped up by the presence of mosques and scholars, but this really means their early game is truly all about timing and getting everything off the ground with as little of a hitch as possible. With that being said, I think that they might have the most unique technologies of any faction in the game. And when I say most unique, I'm saying highest quantity, which can benefit them in the 4th age, which we'll discuss in the landmark section as well. Militarily, Delhi is quite scary, as they get access to 2 types of elephant in the 3rd age, giving them a destructive amount of punching power with their tusks and accompanying soldiers, depending on which variant you go for. And much like the Abbasids, the Delhi Sultanate can also use their infantry to construct things, only this time it's defensive buildings, such as walls, gates, and towers. This is a great way to get a very aggressive expansion on the board walled off before your enemy can react. Honestly, I honestly think that Delhi is a sleeper faction that most people forego in lieu of a more straightforward faction like Rus or French. And that's not to say that those factions are good. Of course, we all know them to be top tier, but rather that Delhi has so many amazing tools at their disposal. Some of the highest damage men-at-arms, with a strong supporting elephant charge, can be one of the hardest things to counter if executed properly. They are so fun, and there's so many fun tactics to take advantage of, such as, early scholar play and tons of other things that truly make this a unique experience above a lot of the other civilizations. So, if that's all you want to know, feel free to head on out, but before you do, please don't forget to comment, like, or subscribe to the channel. Each one of those things helps out in varying degrees, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Let's get started here on our Delhi Sultanate Civilization Guide. Let's now go into a general overview of the Delhi Sultanate, kind of similar to what we just talked about. Now, the Sultanate is interesting. You have a lot of mechanics that don't really come to fruition until the later portions of the game, but you can still take really good advantage of them in the early portions of the game. I just think that it's kind of a little hard to see the advantages of it. So to start off with, their big focus is, of course, on research. And how this works is you build a mosque, and then within that mosque, a scholar is automatically garrisoned for the first mosque you built, and then you're going to have to do that more and more. And we'll go into this more in the technology portion, but essentially these mosques are going to give you an aura, very similar to the Abbasids or the HRE, where you're building and expanding that aura. That will reduce the amount of time it takes to research any research, because all their technology is free, it just takes a long time. If you were to not put any scholars in anything, a standard 90-second research would take 500% more time. So it's a substantial amount of time. But the nice thing here is, as you fill in more and more scholars into more and more mosques, you can get that down pretty low. And I'll give you more concrete numbers and details once we jump into the technology portion of this video, like I was saying. But needless to say, that is the biggest portion of the Delhi Sultanate, is really being able to have all of your technology take off in a way that is different than your other factions. Other people need to make blacksmiths, and they got to go through that whole situation, that whole time sink that it takes to make all of the technologies. The Sultanate can make 2 blacksmiths and just be churning out each and every one at no cost to them. So it's not going to shortchange their economy in any way. And that's a really huge boon. But outside of that is the ability to then place your scholar in an actual military building. And by doing this, it then allows you to produce units 100% faster. Getting efficient production is the name of this technology, and it is huge. So this allows you to have an army take off quickly once you get into the second and third ages, where Delhi Sultanate can really start to take a huge pound of flesh in that third age with all of its elephants, which we'll get into in just a little bit. And the last big thing that the scholar really has going for it is a research called sanctity. So this allows you to capture sacred sites before the third age. No other civilization can do that. Even the HRE, which start with a prelate, which has the ability to, inspire and come out in the first age, they can't go capture holy sites. Once you research sanctity, you capture a sacred site, and it increases the gold that a sacred site generates by 100%. So all of this combined really makes the Delhi Sultanate a sleeper faction, in my opinion. I think that people don't really see the added benefit of all of these things because they maybe take a little too long to get invested in them. So we'll go into that in the build order portion, and how jumping into these technologies early can make the Delhi Sultanate take off even faster. They hit a really good ramp. Now, militarily speaking, of course, the elephant in the room is the elephants. They get access to two different elephants. They have both the war elephant and the tower war elephant. The war elephant would just simply be a melee combat variant with higher health and more melee armor, and as well as two spearmen on the back, so it gives it a cavalry bonus. And the tower war elephant has less health, higher ranged armor, no melee armor, but it has archers that can be upgraded to crossbowmen on the back. So both of them are very good and very strong, and they also do siege damage with their tusks, which is beautiful. So when you're looking at the Delhi Sultanate on paper, you're like, oh, it doesn't really have much unique things going for it. It just gets these elephants, which, are awesome, right? Who wouldn't want these elephants? But they have a lot of other things under the hood that make them super strong, right? You can put armor onto the elephants. You can do forced march, which allows your units to move 100% faster, so they can get in the back line and destroy siege equipment very easily. Like, a lot of these things are kind of hidden away from what the kind of standard viewer would see. Like, oh yeah, I'm just taking a look through this stuff. I don't see anything necessarily amazing about their faction. They don't have a bunch of unique units or stuff like that. Trust me, you can really, really, really take off with the House of Learning landmark, because you get the honed blades. This increases the damage of men-at-arms and knights by 3, thus making it so that the knights and the men-at-arms for the Delhi Sultanate are some of the strongest in the game as far as just raw damage output. So you take a really strong front line of knights. You have a nice supporting amount of archers, crossbowmen, whatever it's going to be. And then the thundering, pounding trunks of the elephant, and Dumbo is just on parade. Like, you have such a strong faction that, on top of the things that make them strong from just simply their elephants or making their knights and men-at-arms better, or their lancers, I'm sorry, is the ability to then color as much of the blacksmith research into them. You can make it so that your men-at-arms and knights have so much added melee and range defense, not to include, of course, additional range damage, before even getting into that 4th age. So you have such a high amount of research you can pour into every facet of the Delhi Sultanate that I think that, like I've said before, it just becomes a sleeper faction because so many people think that it maybe takes too long to get going. But trust me, once we go through some build orders and talk about the unique techs, you're going to see that the Delhi Sultanate can crush in the early game as well as the late game. And probably the last closing fact I do want to talk about is the fact that all of the infantry can produce walls and gates, so they can make palisades and palisade gates. I think I had said outposts in the intro. That's not true. They can make palisades and palisade gates at the dark age, so spearmen can start walling things off immediately, and that is going to be really, really huge once we talk about stuff when it comes to build orders and other kind of tricks that they've got up their sleeve. But let's dive into a little bit more about the Delhi Sultanate, starting with their unique units. So here we are with the unique units, or just the units in general for the Delhi Sultanate. And like I've said, there's nothing really overly unique about anything that we're looking at right now, aside from really awesome looking aesthetic. I think that's probably my favorite thing of jumping into each and every one of these units and upgrading them all the way to elite, is just kind of seeing how each one looks. I love the look of every single faction. But when we take a look at you know, the spearmen or the men-at-arms or the archers, the crossbowmen or the hand cannons, you can see it's all just standard fare. Nothing crazy or different about them. It is worth noting, of course, like I've said, you can make the palisade walls or the palisade gate on each and every one of these. Now, I have not gotten any of the upgrades for the men-at-arms here. They just have their standard condas, where they will get Khalij later once we upgrade them. That will also apply to the elite lancers. And when we get into the technology portion, I'll just kind of jump back and forth to this little area and show off these units and their respective melee weapon and armor increases they would get. So I just wanted to show these guys on their standard state, just upgraded to elite. So again, nothing new, nothing unique. You get your standard lancer, you get your standard horseman, but of course the big things that do matter the most with the Delhi Sultanate is their elephants. So taking a look at the war elephant, it's got nice 1400 health. Hovering over this, we get 30 damage tusks that also have spears in the back here for 20 more melee damage. That it gives you a plus 40 versus cav, which is very nice, with a nice armor of 4 and 2 range damage, which of course can be increased even further. And we'll kind of jump into this a little bit more once we get over to that area, with the armored beast portion that gives you 2 more armor onto this. So it's going to make it even tankier for these big boys. So they do a lot of damage. Now looking at the tower war elephant, we have a different profile. So we get the tusks that do a nice 30 damage. We get the 15 damage from each bow with 2 bows on back, but look at that health. 960 health, so we're getting what, 440 less health. No armor versus melee, but an armor versus range. And to be totally honest, it just depends upon the matchup that you're in. If you're playing against a lot of French knights, you know what, maybe you go with more war elephants just to give you a little bit more pound for pound punching power. Or you know what, you're going against a lot of Holy Roman Empire, well, go with the tower elephants, get the upgrade that turns these guys into crossbowmen, and they're just going to be mulching through a lot of the opposition. Even though these tusks don't say siege damage, from everything I've seen, they do additional damage to buildings. And please, by all means, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that, but it may be just my anecdotal experience in seeing how they've been able to rampage through things. It's also, when they're moving, they'll keep damaging with their tusks. So all these things kind of come into conjunction to do a lot of damage with the tusks on these guys. Because also you look at that range, like these guys have a 0.29 tile range versus the tusks in this is a 1 tile range. So they actually have a little bit of a give there. So that's the unique units for the Delhi Sultanate. Again, not a ton of stuff that's crazy unique. It's going to be the technology, which we're going to get into next, that's going to make this all unique. Now, the unique technologies for the Delhi Sultanate are the biggest mechanic for the Delhi Sultanate, and it's a really important one. So before we actually dive into the individual unique mechanics, let's talk about the scholarly influence, the aura that is generated from the mosques or madrasa. And the way that this works is any building that would natively have a research in it, a stable, a mining camp, anything of the sort that has something you can research, will increase the aura of this scholarly influence, this gold aura. And anything like a house, an outpost, or a wall would not, as you can see here. Keeps will also expand things because they do also have a researches within them. And as long as the building is within this, they will benefit from the scholarly influence. And the scholarly influence is, if I click here and hover over, it tells us the research rate of buildings within influence of a mosque or madrasa is increased by 12.5% for each garrison scholar in all mosques and madrasas. So what that means is, this right now says 1.15 seconds. If I were to take these guys out, even though these 2 mosques are empty, this one is not. So it's still contributing to the reduction on this research time. So that's important to know. And another thing too is that your overall time to reduce influence is not necessarily a flat 12.5%. There is diminishing returns here. Well, that was weird. So remember, like I said, a 90-second tech takes 500% longer to make if you've got 0 scholars or they're not in range. Here's an example. 6 minutes, 15 seconds. It's free. It's just going to take me a hell of a long time to complete it. And then as I put the scholars in, I'll get more and more time. And it's worth noting, if you start a technology, let's just go for like 2-3 seconds here, right? And stop it. It saves that the percentage of the progress. So you can just start it right back up. And obviously we haven't completed enough of it. You can see 6 minutes. Let it go down here into like 5 minutes and some seconds. And there we go. You can see it still says 6:15 because that's the total amount of time, but you jump back into it, it's still at that same point. So that's kind of worth knowing because you maybe want to custom build how your technology is going to research. But for every scholar you put into a mosque, it's going to be a speed up from a previous the time modifier is about a 20% increase. And that has diminishing returns up into a certain point. So once you put 9 total scholars in, it's going to be the same amount of time as any 90 seconds. It's going to be that flat 100%. And as you go over 9 scholars, it's going to increase more and more. So you're going to get to 86%, to 75, to 66, to 60%. So basically, the more scholars, the better, up into, again, a point. Once you get to 21 scholars, it's 32 seconds. 22 is 31 seconds. 23 is 31 seconds. So you do hit diminishing returns. 23 is the max amount that you'll see. It just zeroes out after that. So honestly, you don't need to go really beyond, I would say 12 or 13 scholars. That overall makes it so your research time would be 60% that of the normal research time. So it's a significant improvement. So just to kind of go through that, because it is very important and it is the linchpin of the faction. Scholars are going to be what's the big driving force. And again, of course, you can put a scholar into a military building after you've researched certain things to make them produce 100% faster. So let's go through those technologies now. So we get efficient production. That's the exact one I was just talking about. Allows scholars to garrison in military buildings, boosting production speed by 100%. Let's see what that would look like on paper. 22 seconds would jump down to 11 seconds. So you get a nice increase there, making you able to pump out units much faster. This is really huge when you factor in a war elephant will take 30 seconds to make, which is just amazing. Other technology here is Sanctity. This is the big one that allows you to capture sacred sites before the Third Age, and they generate 100% more gold. You don't need to worry about mining as much as long as you've got Sanctity up and you've captured 1 or 2 holy sites. It's just a really, really nice boon right there. This one right here, All-Seeing Eye, increases the sight range of a scholar, not as huge, but this one's really nice. Swiftness increases the speed of scholars by 50%. This gives them some serious wheels, and they can get out on the battlefield quickly. And then lastly, we get Zeal. Units healed by scholars gain 50% attack speed for 3 seconds. This is a huge buff, so if you keep it with your army, and the real way to do this would be, I guess I'll cover this in army comp, but keep your scholars with your elephants behind them, and they'll just kind of keep boosting them up, which is really, really cool. Into our House of Learning, one of the landmarks, one of the auto-pick landmarks in my opinion, you get Reinforced Foundations, which increases the pop gain from houses and town centers by 5. The Tranquil Venue, which mosques restore 1 health to nearby friendly units every second. Lookout Towers increases the sight range of outposts by 50%. The Honed Blades, which I was talking about, this is going to increase your men-at-arms and knights damage by 3. So just to kind of give you what that looks like, this guy's damage right now is 15. It would jump up to 18 without any other blacksmith modifications to it, which would make it, I think, jump to a total of 21, 22 after everything's said and done. So very, very significant there. Then also Hardy Rations increases the carry capacity of villagers by 5. Moving into the stable, we get the Armored Beasts, grants 2 more armor to War Elephants and Tower Elephants. That's a huge boon, especially to the Tower Elephants, which do not have any melee armor. Onto the archery range, we get the ability to make our Tower Elephants into Siege Elephants. So upgrade Tower Elephants to have elite crossbowmen as riders instead of archers, which is quite nice. And then for the keep, this is a huge one. Boom. Village fortresses. Keeps act like town centers, including unit production, population capacity, and technology. That is such a strong boon to be able to have an actual keep expand out onto the map for you. That then is a drop-off point. That is such a nice little ditty right there. Slow burning defenses increases the fire armor of stone wall towers, keeps an outpost by 10, and well, that's burning oil. Whoops. Whoopsies. Going into our dock, we get the patchwork repairs, increases the repair rate of fishing ships. Also worth noting, your fishing boats, they have bows on them, so they can defend themselves, which is pretty cool. Into the blacksmith. everything standard fare for the blacksmith except for forced march, which becomes a unit infantry or infantry ability for units that allows them to move 100% faster for 10 seconds. Remember, that's really nice because they can't attack while they're doing this, but it allows you to get all the way in the back line and destroy springald or trebuchets, and it's harder to bog that down. And this, of course, is just me talking about how that all works together. It is also worth noting, too, that when it comes to berry bushes across the map, you increase the yield just like you do with the Abbasids. So you also gather rate from that. Their gather rate from them is increased by 25% as well. So that concludes our very heavy portion here on the unique technologies. Let's go into some landmark decisions now. So our first set of landmarks moving from the Dark Age into the Feudal Age are the Tower of Victory and the Dome of Faith. So the Tower of Victory allows melee and ranged infantry who move near this landmark permanently gain about 15% attack speed. And then Dome of Faith produces scholars at minus 50% cost from the landmark. In my opinion, auto pick here is Dome of Faith. Being able to get scholars out at 75 gold versus 150 gold is huge because you can just have these things pumping your scholars out. And especially in that second age, when you want to start making more mosques and eventually get into a madrasa later in the fourth age, just getting them out cheaper is going to be very nice for that early economy boom so that you can really get your scholarly influence online. Moving into the third age, we get two more landmarks. And again, I think that it's pretty interesting because I think that the Delhi Sultanate has a very linear choice of landmark until they get to the fourth age, which is going to be very matchup dependent. And in my opinion, House of Learning just beats out over the Compound of the Defender. But the House of Learning grants no immediate bonus other than advancing to the next age, but contains many unique economic and religious technologies. The Compound of the Defender, on the other hand, infantry units can build stone walls, gates, and towers, reduce stone cost of buildings and their emplacements by 25%. I can see where the Compound of the Defender would absolutely have its worth, but the House of Learning to me just has too many benefits, right? To having your villagers be able to hold more, to have mosques heal things for you, to have your men-at-arms and knights do more damage. All that is in the House of Learning. I just find it to be a much better choice of landmark than the Compound of the Defender. Last but not least, we have the fourth, the Imperial Age, and we get some spicy options. The Palace of the Sultan automatically produces Tower War Elephants, garrison up to 4 scholars in the landmark to increase production speed, versus the Hisar Academy, constantly generates food based on total number of technologies researched. So this, I think, definitely comes down to the matchup, where you are in the game, what you are really needing more of. Are you needing that heavy production of Tower War Elephants? Then go with the Palace of the Sultan. And the way that this works is, at the top end, if you put no scholars into this building, it takes 200 seconds, so 3 minutes, 20 seconds to bring out a war elephant. If you put 4 scholars in, it takes 100 seconds, so 1 minute and 40 seconds to get 1 war elephant out for free. For absolute free. Obviously, the thing that's going to count against you is your production. So, I'm sorry, your overall house. How much, not food, but again, how many production? This button right there. Population. There we go. The population. How much population you have left? Now, Hisar Academy is interesting. So what this is going to do is it's going to generate food for you equal to the number of technologies researched every 6 seconds. So if you look at this portion right there, active research items. Once this number goes up, that's how much you're going to get. So every 6 seconds, if you only have 4 technologies, you're going to get 4 food. Now, if you want to compute this across every single technology, which the Delhi Sultanate is more than capable of achieving within even the fourth, by the time the fourth age hits, right? You have to still get the fourth age technologies, of course, but you can have pretty much every single one up to that point very easily. But all in combined, it's 73 technologies. So 73 every 6 seconds, times that by 10 for a whole minute, 730 food pumping out of the Hisar Academy if you get every single tech. I mean, even if you miss 3, still you're getting 700 food. It's still quite a bit of food. So if you need a high ramp up of food production, Hisar Academy is really going to help you out. And if you couple this with your sacred sites, it allows you to have pretty much the only thing that you need to constantly be worrying about is your stone or wood production, as long as you've got a good amount of gold coming in from the sacred sites. So this is really going to be dependent upon your matchup and what's going on in that matchup for you to choose. Are you going with the Palace to get those Tower War Elephants or Hisar Academy to get that food? Moving into the Navy, it's the exact same as the Abbasids, ships, everything. So let's go through this very quickly. The Dow is your entry archer ship. Doesn't have as much tankability. It is quite fast, and it shoots 4 burst attacks of 8 damage arrows. As you can see, if I just click over here, it'll go ahead and shoot them. So a lot of fast attack, a lot of fast moving ship, but just not the most tankability. Very low health pool. Now moving into the, okay, stop over there. The Bacala here, we have a ship that's very interesting. It has a ballista that does 50 damage versus the Hulk of the French or the English or the Holy Roman Empire, which does 100. But it also gets a 5 burst 10 damage archer that will constantly be shooting regardless of what direction you're facing, because these ballista only act on the broadside. So I'm going to go ahead and press G, select over here, and as you can see, this will shoot, and that little bar will fill up, showing you that the ballista needs to needs to reload. Now you can do what's called spinning to win, where you just simply click a different direction, and the ballista from the opposite broadside will shoot. So you just kind of make sure that little back arrow is there, and it'll just kind of keep going around. You're basically bypassing the reload. And that's how you make these ballista ships do a lot more damage, is by basically just foregoing that. But the nice advantage is that that archer is going to constantly be shooting no matter what direction you're facing. A nice 360 shot, which is pretty cool. Most factions don't get that, again, aside from the Abbasids. Now our last ship here is the Xebec. Now this sits between the other 2 warships. You've got the Carrack for the English, French, and Holy Roman Empire on the, I guess you could say, quote-unquote bottom end, and then the Baoshuan on the top end for the Chinese and the Mongolians. The Xebec kind of strikes a middle ground in between tankability, total cost, and outright DPS, because this thing has got 4 cannons that do 60 damage each. And I compare that to the Carrack. The Carrack has got 3 cannons that do 70 damage each. And then the Baoshuan has 4 cannons that do 70 damage each. Again, kind of just strikes that middle ground. It's got 300 less total health than a Baoshuan, but I think it's about 100 and some total health more than a Carrack. So again, right smack dab in the middle. And those cannon shots are always just kind of cool to see. So, like I've said, the Navy for the Delhi Sultanate is not blow you out of the water, amazing, different, cool, or anything like that. It's pretty much very standard fare when you compare it to the Abbasids, and it just sits right in the middle of everyone else for the most part. They do get their special technology here, though, for patchwork repairs, which increases the repair rate of fishing ships by 100%, but no offensive or defensive capabilities, to say the least. Let's move now here into some army composition. So the army composition of the Delhi Sultanate is going to be very interesting. It's of course going to be very reactionary. All of these portions of the videos that I've talked about so far when it comes to army comp is going to be a reactionary tale, right? It all depends upon what the opposition has got on the battlefield and how you can counter it. So do they have a whole ton of archers? Well, make some horsemen. Do they have a bunch of men-at-arms? Well, maybe go some crossbowmen or some lancers, depending upon what the situation calls for. But really you want to hinge yourself upon, and I've upgraded these guys to the newest, to their Khalij, so you can see their increased damage profile. And that's a cool looking sword too. You want to just hinge upon the fact that you have very strong men-at-arms. So get that high damage out there, and also the fact that they've got some wheels on them. They can get up close and personal. So mixing stuff like this together, where you've got the ability for the spearmen to take a lot of the brunt damage, or maybe take some of the charge damage in from not horsemen, but from elite lancers, is very crucial, because then you can pop the speed buff on these men-at-arms and get into that back line cookie jar and start stealing some of them goods, start destroying some of the siege equipment that you're going to be dealing with, and all sorts of other action. Of course, you also want to be mixing springalds into your army all the time. They're just such a strong siege piece. Honestly, in my opinion, it's the strongest siege equipment in the game, because it can just do so much damage. It can be upgraded so well. They're very fast and quick on the draw. I love them a lot. Now, when it comes to your elephants, the big thing you want to take advantage of is your scholars. Obviously, they can heal, but a lot of people are not going to micro-killing your scholars. They're going to micro-killing your elephants. And you can counter a lot of the damage by simply having 2 or 3 scholars with your army behind your elephants, buffing and healing. That's right, remember, buffing. Go to the House of Learning. Let's go to the House of Learning. Let's go to that House of Learning. And you get Tranquil, or I'm sorry, where is it? Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's in the mosque itself. You're going to get the, there it is, Zeal. Units healed by scholars gain 50% attack speed for 3 seconds. Try and get those buffs onto those elephants. You have your scholars there. They're going to be able to move faster. Remember, swiftness is going to keep them in line. Right now, their tile speed is 1 second, and the elephant is 1 second. So it's about the same movement speed. With swiftness, they're going to stay right up on the butt of those elephants and keep them healed. So mixing in scholars with your army, even if it's not just with elephants, is very crucial to getting that swiftness buff across the whole board. But again, outside of that, react to what your enemy is making. All right, now for the build order of the Delhi Sultanate, it's going to be very spicy. It's got a lot of timing down, so don't worry if you mess up a lot in the beginning stages. Just kind of get the general feel for what you have to do. So to start off, you're going to make a mill, a lumber camp, and a mosque immediately. You start with 100 extra wood, so do all 3 of those and then make a house. Those should be your first 4 actions, and then take your remaining villagers, put them on food, have your town center start constructing more villagers, have them go to food till you get to 6 to 8 total people on food, and then have the rest go to wood. Now, 2 other big things that you're going to need to do. Immediately send your scout out looking for sacred sites. That's very important. Make them find that sacred site fast. And each building you make all of its technologies. With the mosque, make the sanctity technology first, because this is what enables you to capture sacred sites, and it makes sacred sites give you 200 gold a minute. That is huge. So once you've done that, the initial flurry of the game has kind of calmed down. It's okay to kind of start taking things in a measured pace. Make sure your scout is exploring, trying to find your closest sacred site. So of course, don't find anything that's looking against your edge of the map. Try and find stuff that's more towards the heart of the map. Stuff like that. It takes me not too long to find mine, but I finally get it, which is pretty good. So once you've got everything kind of online, you've got about 6 people on food, 3 people on lumber, go ahead and make yourself another mining camp. You just have to wait till you get to 50 more lumber. That's the big portion here. Once you get to 50 more lumber, get that mining camp online, and that'll enable you to get up to 200 gold in the first stage of the Dark Age. So a lot of people actually will make a second mosque here in the first stage. I don't. I find it maybe a little too cumbersome, and I'm just maybe not that great of a Delhi Sultanate player. So it's a little too hard on my micro, so I don't. But you definitely can as a big push that a lot of people do. Now from this stage, you've got 2 routes you can take. A lot of people will go for an early first, second age push and rush to a sacred site and then wall it off with spearmen. Or you can just kind of start teching up as normal and starting to react to your enemy as you need be. I personally think that going the sacred site route is the best route because you get access to so much gold so fast. So once you've made your mining camp, you've got a good mining economy going, get more people on wood because you need to get 150 wood. Once you've done that, you make a barracks. So here's where timing kind of gets tricky. You've got a barracks, you're going to eventually have a spearman come out, and you have to keep looking at your mosque to see when Sanctity's research is done. You see I kind of periodically do it in my little example here. But once Sanctity is around 20 to 30 seconds left, go ahead and pop your scholar out of the mosque and have him go towards a sacred site with 2 or 3 spearmen you've created. This enables you to capture the sacred site, and the spearmen will then make palisades around the sacred site so that your enemy can't just take it away from you immediately. Remember, with Sanctity researched, by the time you reach that sacred site with your scholar on foot, you should hopefully have it completed, and that enables you to make it so that you can get 200 gold a second. You don't have to worry about gold economy as much in the beginning. You will of course need to have people mining gold here and there as you get further and further in. But once you then make the Dome of Learning and you get more scholars going, you can start to get research going fast. So that's the name of the game for the first stage of the Delhi Sultanate. And I know it's very hectic and crazy sounding, and it is. I had to restart doing this like 4 or 5 times because I wanted to try and show off how much that beginning portion is so crucial timing wise. And I would mess up and not have my scout go out, or I wouldn't get the researches. There's so many things that can go wrong in the beginning first like 20-30 seconds. Don't worry if they do. Just adjust, build the technologies, make your scout go out, send the scholar when you can. You don't need to be on the cutting edge for everything. Don't worry about it. You'll get there in time. But once you progress to the second age, there's some big things you need to do. Make 2 archery ranges. This allows you to support your spearmen because you might be dealing with some sort of aggression now at this point. And make sure every single building that's got a technology is making that technology. That's crucial. Some other big points in the second age: make your second mosque fast, because your Dome of Wisdom or Dome of Learning enables you to make your scholars at 75 gold a pop, which is very inexpensive. So you'll be able to get 6 scholars online, which gets you up to some very good research quickly. And then lastly, the most important thing about jumping to the second age: make 2 blacksmiths. If you make 2 blacksmiths, you can tech way beyond your opponent in both ranged and melee damage and armor, of course, right? So that also depends upon your opponent. Are you playing someone who's playing English longbowmen? Well, then you want to go with the range defense improvements first. Hey, are you playing against maybe a French player and they've got a lot of knights? Well, then go with the melee defense first. Make your technology options suit the actual play you're going against. There's no like catch-all easy one. Just go with whatever makes the most sense. So that is your quick build order for the Delhi Sultanate. I know this one's very complex, but once you kind of get it down and get your hands with it, you'll be able to take off very quickly in the early game, much above your opponent, because you have the ability to take these sacred sites and get so much strong research early in the game. And at that, it brings our video to a close. So hopefully this helps you out in breaking into the Delhi Sultanate. It is a difficult faction to really wrap your mind around, and it's much in the same way that the Abbasids are. But once you really get into how that scholarly influence can make your early game very strong with the right amount of timing and the right placement of things, you can really take off. And something I maybe didn't go over very well in the build order portion is that you do have to have that mosque generating and hitting everything with a scholarly influence, but you can also find that you can connect buildings quickly. So even if you're learning and you're new to it and you haven't quite maybe hit your stride with placing things, you can still shore up those gaps with other buildings that will definitely connect stuff. So don't worry about breaking in very hard and fast. You'll get it. Just play a lot more of the Delhi Sultanate and you'll find that it is a very strong faction with amazing research, strong military units that take advantage of that research, and just devastating Dumbo drop elements. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. If you have any build order recommendations, any kind of improvements you'd say upon this guide, please by all means let it be known in the comment section below. I try to make sure as much information as possible is disseminated to the people, so it helps out a ton. But as always, again, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.